Okay, we're now going to take a deeper dive into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the meeting between Presidents Putin and Xi in Uzbekistan. Joining me tonight, Einar Tangen. Einar, always a pleasure. He is the Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute. Einar, as always, thanks for joining us. I want to get right to it and talk about a lot of tongues wagging in the West about the meeting between Presidents Putin and Xi. And of course, this is President Xi's first international trip since the pandemic began. What do you make of all this?
Well, the narrative in Washington was already written before the meeting, but there's been some surprises. And right now, you're seeing the West kind of retrenching, trying to figure out how they're going to present a different narrative. There's three things that people should pay attention to, Sean, and that is, one, Xi Jinping is talking about economics. He's not supporting any kind of, military action in any place, but he's very clear about security issues and those core security interests for China. That would be Taiwan. For Russia, it would be not having NATO missiles on their border.
Yeah, and also, let's talk more about the relationship between China and Russia, the possibility of this oil as well as gas pipelines that could go through Mongolia between China and Russia. Let's pick up on this economic theme, because one thing we always hear out of President Xi and China's government is they don't want other nations, especially developed nations, to basically dictate what developing countries should or should not do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you saw here is Xi spread the message wide and clear. Remember, he went to Kazakhstan first, assured them that territorial integrity was very important, but he also made a great effort to go to other nations and assure them that they're not going to be cut out by Russia, that China is going to accept and promote a regional, stable economic pact that involves everybody. It's not going to just be a one-on-one relationship. Obviously, Russia is very anxious to have a secure place to sell its oil and gas. China is willing to accept it, but not at the expense of other countries. So at this juncture, China and Russia are forming a close economic partnership, but it's not necessarily what the West was anticipating in terms of some sort of visible support for what's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah, let's pick up on that. Do you think that President Xi, as well as Putin, came out of this meeting with what they wanted?
Well, I mean, I think Putin would have wanted China or Xi Jinping to say something very, very strong about supporting, Russian, interests in Ukraine. Obviously, there have been some setbacks on the ground. We'll have to see how that turns out. I mean, war, unfortunately, is a series of battles. You win and lose, but the war continues on. So at this juncture, yes, Putin would have wanted something stronger, but you'll note that he said, look, I understand, I appreciate China's balanced view towards the situation and their support on our core interests. Obviously, he's keen to keep the economic situation stable as Russia turns away from Europe and America.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk more about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Basically, what is it? How significant do you think the fact is that Xi took this time to make his first trip out of the country?
Well, it's extremely important. 20-year-old organization. This is actually the 22nd meeting of the leaders. And it's an internally focused group. They're concerned about terrorism within their borders. They're not trying to expand to other areas to talk about military alliances. It is not in any way, shape, or form that a military. They do joint exercises, but it's always aimed at cross-border terrorism or internal terrorism, being ready for any kind of separatist movements or any kind of threats within this group. So it's not outward focused. Very, very different from the perception of NATO, at least by Russia and China and many other nations, which sees it as very much more aggressive and outward focused.
Yeah, I think that both Russia and China have gone to great lengths to point out the differences between the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and NATO. So what do you think is next? What are we going to come away from these meetings the last couple of days, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and what do you think the West is going to focus on as well? I'm very curious to see what the headlines are going to be tomorrow.
Tomorrow, it's definitely the the dialogue is going to be about, oh, China expresses lukewarm support for Russia, but doesn't back away, and isn't doing the right thing in terms of supporting Ukraine. That's already been written into the script. In terms of what's going forward, Xi Jinping went at great pains to talk about creating a more stable win-win international order. Right now, you see the world in disarray. It's not just the situation in Ukraine. When you start looking at the fissures that are developing between the global south and the stands, basically developing nations and emerging nations versus the northern developed nations, you can clearly see that the international order that was created by the WTO has kind of fallen apart, and you see more regionalism, whether it's TPP or RCEP, the BRICS banks, the BRICS itself, which is now attracting more membership, as is the SCO. The AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, has been successful. They're working collaboratively with other institutions, but it's more focused on creating the kind of infrastructure that China believes, based on its own experience, brings prosperity.
Einar, as always, great insight. And I'll send you on WeChat a couple of those headlines tomorrow just to show you you're probably prophetic. Thanks a lot. Einar Tangen. Well, coming up.